The void between stars was silent, but it was not peaceful. For centuries, the galaxy had been ruled by tyrants who believed themselves eternal, their fleets vast, their dominion unshakable. Worlds bowed, empires fell, and species were chained beneath banners of cruelty. Yet in the shadows of forgotten space, a single black ship drifted against the tide of history. Its hull bore scars of battles no one spoke of, and its crew carried a secret the tyrants had never imagined: the will of humanity, unbroken and unafraid. When the alien warlords first heard of Earth, they laughed. To them, humanity was too young, too scattered, too fragile to matter. But laughter turned to unease when the first human warships emerged from slipstream. And unease turned to fear when those same ships, outnumbered 100 to 1, refused to yield. It was not power that startled the galaxy, but defiance, the kind of defiance that burned through chains and shattered thrones. Humanity had chosen war not for conquest, but for survival, and nothing the tyrants could throw at them would change that. The Black Ship was the spearhead of that defiance. Whispered about in enemy halls, feared in enemy fleets, it had become more than a vessel. It was a symbol. Its crew, ordinary people forged in extraordinary fire, carried the weight of a war no one believed they could win. And still, they pressed forward, each battle fought on the edge of annihilation. They knew the galaxy watched, waiting for humanity to break, to beg, to kneel. But the crew of the Black Ship knew something the galaxy had forgotten. Humans had always stood tallest when the night was darkest. Every tyrant believed fear would silence humanity, but the opposite happened. With each planet lost, humans hardened. With each massacre, they remembered. With every act of cruelty, they carried their rage like fuel, forging weapons not from steel alone, but from the raw fire of survival. Their enemies thought them reckless, but humanity was not reckless, they were relentless. They had learned the cost of submission in their own history, and they swore never again. On the bridge of the Black Ship, tension was constant. Each mission could be their last, and each choice weighed 1,000 lives. The crew didn't fight for glory or empire. They fought for families waiting on the edge of extinction, for children who deserved a tomorrow, for the memory of a homeworld that had already paid too high a price. In the silence of the stars, every heartbeat echoed like a drum of war. And as the tyrants gathered their fleets, the Black Ship gathered its resolve. The galaxy had seen many wars, but never one like this. For the first time, a species that had been dismissed as weak dared to stand against overlords who had ruled for ages. Humanity's weapons were not the most advanced, their fleets not the largest. But where the tyrants relied on fear, humans relied on something far more dangerous: hope. It was a hope that spread like wildfire, igniting whispers of rebellion across enslaved worlds. If humanity could stand, others could rise. If humanity could bleed the tyrants, then perhaps the galaxy could be free. But freedom had a cost, and the Black Ship knew it well. The void was littered with wreckage, both human and alien. Victories came heavy with loss, and every celebration carried the shadow of names carved into memory walls. Still, they pressed forward, for they understood the truth. Surrender was not survival, only a slower death. Humanity had chosen the harder path, and the Black Ship bore the weight of leading it. There were nights when the crew stared into the stars and wondered if they could really endure. They knew the enemy's strength, knew the countless fleets arrayed against them. But they also knew what awaited if they failed. Entire generations born in chains, worlds stripped of life, voices silenced forever. To them, the choice was simple. They would rather die free than live as slaves. And so the Black Ship pressed deeper into enemy territory, carrying the fire of Earth into the heart of the storm. Rumors spread through the tyrant courts. They spoke of human commanders who outmaneuvered entire armadas, of soldiers who fought long after wounds should have claimed them, of civilians who armed themselves with anything they could find rather than bow. The stories seemed impossible, yet every battle proved them true. Humanity had become a paradox, too fragile to survive, yet too fierce to destroy. The galaxy began to whisper a phrase once spoken only in jest: humanity fights like no other. Humanity endures, Humanity wins, and yet victory was far from certain. For every fleet destroyed, more gathered. For every tyrant slain, another rose to take their place. The Black Ship knew the war was not just about weapons, but about time. Whether humanity could endure long enough to shatter the chains of a galaxy, or whether the tyrants would crush them before the spark became ablaze. As the Black Ship emerged from slipspace, its crew braced for what lay ahead. The sensors lit up, revealing an enemy force so vast it blotted out the stars. Entire fleets aligned in perfect formation, their weapons glowing, their commanders certain this would be the battle that ended humanity once and for all. On the bridge, silence fell. Every heartbeat, every breath, seemed to wait for the moment when the void itself would ignite. But the Black Ship did not falter. Its engines hummed, its weapons primed, and its crew tightened their grips on their stations. They had seen impossible odds before, and they had survived. Now, they stood at the edge of history, ready to carve a future the tyrants had sworn was impossible. Humanity had always risen from ashes, and if this was to be their last stand, then it would be one the galaxy would never forget. The commander of the Black Ship looked to the crew, their faces illuminated by the glow of enemy fire. There was no need for speeches, no need for orders beyond what they already knew. They were humanity's line, humanity's defiance, humanity's last hope. And as the first enemy volleys streaked across the void, the Black Ship surged forward, black hull cutting through the dark like a blade. The final war for humanity's survival had begun. But deep in the silence between stars, another question lingered, one no one dared to speak aloud. Could humanity truly shatter the tyrants? Or had they only awakened something far darker, something even the galaxy's rulers feared to face? The answer waited beyond the horizon, in battles yet to come, and in sacrifices yet to be made. The Black Ship pressed on, into fire and shadow, toward a destiny no one could yet see. The Black Ship cut through the void like a shadow born from fire. Behind its armored hull, the crew moved with the rhythm of people who had lived too long on the edge of war. Every console glowed with streams of data. Every alarm was a warning that life or death might be decided in the next breath. They had seen fleets before, massive ones that dwarfed their lone vessel, yet this time felt different. The enemy was not merely gathering, they were waiting, as if they had expected humanity to arrive at this very place, at this very hour. The commander stood silent at the center of the bridge, eyes fixed on the vast formation filling the stars. Dozens of species had bent their strength into this armada. The tyrants had ruled the galaxy for millennia by crushing hope before it could grow. And now humanity had become hope itself. That made them dangerous beyond measure, and that was why this fleet stretched across the horizon of space, its weapons already primed. Humanity had struck a nerve deeper than any weapon could reach. For the crew, this was not just another mission. Each of them had their own reason for standing aboard the Black Ship. Some had lost homes turned to ash, some carried scars from the tyrant's lash, and others simply refused to live in a universe where fear was law. The youngest among them still bore the wide-eyed determination of someone who had never known peace, only war. For them, humanity's survival was not a story to tell. It was the air they breathed, the ground they stood on, the future they fought to build. The ship itself carried a story older than most knew. Its hull had been forged in secret shipyards orbiting Earth's last free bastion, pieced together from salvaged wrecks and stolen tech. Every panel carried the marks of desperate hands. Engineers had worked until their bodies collapsed. Soldiers had carried metal plates through firestorms, and civilians had poured their final resources into a vessel that could carry not just weapons, but the soul of their resistance. That was why the tyrants feared it. It was not the ship's size nor its weapons, but the unity of an entire species bound into its bones. Rumors about the Black Ship spread faster than the tyrants could suppress them. Whispers carried across trade routes, smuggled through forbidden channels, spoken in hidden meeting places where rebels dared to gather. They said the ship struck like lightning and vanished like smoke. They said its crew fought with the fury of 1,000 storms. They said it was humanity's vengeance, a blade forged from sorrow and wrath. No matter how many times the tyrants tried to claim victory, the stories grew louder until even their own soldiers began to doubt the invincibility of their masters. And yet, for all its legend, the Black Ship was fragile. Supplies were scarce, systems strained, and every battle left wounds that no engineer could fully heal. Shields flickered when pushed too hard, engines carried scars that no repair could erase, and ammunition ran thinner with each passing week. The crew knew this truth well, but they never spoke it aloud. To admit weakness was to invite despair, and despair was the tyrant's greatest weapon. Instead, they carried their burdens in silence, holding fast to the belief that so long as the ship still moved, humanity still fought. The galaxy itself seemed divided. Many species watched from the shadows, unwilling to rise, yet unwilling to crush the humans either. Some hoped the tyrants would finally be challenged, while others feared that if humanity fell, their punishment would be shared. Quiet rebellions simmered beneath the surface, rebellions that looked to humanity for proof that the impossible could be done. And though humanity did not yet know it, their fight was no longer theirs alone. Every strike they made rippled through the stars, shaking the chains of countless worlds, but none of this lessened the weight pressing on the Black Ship now. The enemy armada stretched endlessly, its warships glinting with the cold fire of precision. Each vessel was designed for dominance, tested through centuries of conquest. Against such numbers, the Black Ship looked like a lone spark before a storm. And yet sparks had a way of igniting the impossible. The commander's voice broke the silence at last, issuing calm orders that carried across the bridge. The crew's hands moved quickly, not in panic, but with the steady certainty of people who had lived in the shadow of death for too long to fear it anymore. Outside, the void rumbled with shifting formations. The tyrants were not rushing. They wanted humanity to see the scale of what faced them. They wanted fear to take root before the first shot was fired. It was how they had won every war, by convincing their enemies they had already lost. But the crew of the Black Ship did not see an ending. They saw an opening, a chance to strike, to bleed the armada, to prove once again that humans would not bow. Yet behind the defiance, questions lingered. Why had the tyrants gathered so many ships for one vessel? Why here, in this lonely stretch of space, so far from their core worlds? And why did their fleet not immediately attack? Suspicion spread through the crew like a whisper, unspoken but sharp. It felt like a trap, not merely a battle. Something unseen lingered in the dark, waiting. The commander knew it too. Every instinct warned that this was not the full picture. The tyrants were cruel, but they were not foolish. If they had committed this many ships, it meant they feared something more than the Black Ship alone. The thought pressed heavy on every mind. Had humanity's defiance awakened an enemy far worse, one that even the tyrants could not control? Tension coiled tighter with every passing second. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The Black Ship drifted closer to the armada's edge, its weapons locked but silent, its crew waiting for the storm to break. Somewhere in the distance between those endless warships, an answer waited. An answer that could decide not just the fate of the Black Ship, but of all humanity, and perhaps the galaxy itself. Still, the crew did not waver. They had walked this road before, each step carved from fire and sacrifice. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Yet deep in their hearts, every soul aboard knew this truth. The war was no longer just for humanity's survival. It was for the freedom of every world watching, waiting, daring to hope. The void stretched silent once more. Then, as if the universe itself could not bear the tension, the first alien ship broke formation. Its engines flared, weapons lit, and the Black Ship braced. This was the moment they had been led to. A battle was about to begin, but in the depths of every mind, the same question burned hotter than ever. Was this truly the tyrant's final attempt to end humanity? Or the opening move of something far darker, waiting just beyond the dark horizon? The alien warship that broke formation drifted closer, its silhouette stretching across the void like the shadow of a predator. The Black Ship's crew locked their eyes on the tactical displays, watching every flicker of its thrusters, every shift in its hull plating. It was not charging in with reckless speed, but neither did it hold the rigid precision of the rest of the fleet. Instead, it moved deliberately, as if testing the waters, probing, waiting to see what humanity would do. On the bridge, silence pressed down heavier than the enemy fleet itself. The commander's orders came soft and measured, every word chosen with the weight of survival behind it. Weapons charged, shields strengthened, but the crew did not fire. Humanity had learned through bitter blood that the first shot was often the hardest choice to make. Too soon, and you handed your enemy an excuse. Too late, and you were ash. The crew of the Black Ship knew they were staring into that moment, the razor's edge where history could be rewritten or erased. But then something unexpected happened. The alien warship halted its advance. Lights rippled across its hull, not in the steady pulse of weaponry, but in strange, shifting patterns. It was communication, an old method, almost ceremonial, rarely used in modern war. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy looks. Why would the tyrants use this? They were known for domination, not dialogue. Unless, of course, this wasn't truly the tyrants' doing. The ship's communication systems translated fragments of the signal, but the message came broken, incomplete. Words of warning, fragments of distress, and a single repeating phrase that chilled everyone aboard. It awakens. The crew didn't know what it meant, but the way the alien vessel faltered, as though fearful of its own fleet, sent unease rippling through the room. The commander ordered silence. No reply, no move that could expose their uncertainty. Yet beneath the quiet, tension grew. If the alien warship was trying to warn them, what could be so terrible that even the tyrant's servants would risk hesitation? Was this fleet assembled not merely to destroy humanity, but to contain something far greater? While the bridge calculated every possibility, life continued elsewhere aboard the ship, each corner holding its own story, its own conflict. In the engineering decks, the hum of overworked reactors filled the air. Grease-streaked mechanics argued in hushed voices about failing coolant lines and overstrained shields. They all knew the truth. One direct hit from the fleet outside could end them. Yet they kept working, hands steady, voices quiet, because if the ship fell silent, so would humanity's hope. In the medbay, the scars of earlier battles lingered. Men and women carried wounds that no medicine could erase, yet refused to leave the fight. One soldier with a shattered arm practiced one-handed drills with determination, while another limped across the deck with a weapon slung over their shoulder, unwilling to rest. For them, the war was not about pride. It was about ensuring that no one else suffered as they had. Every scar was a reminder of why they could not stop. Meanwhile, in the mess hall-turned-strategy room, a group of younger crew whispered about the rumors. They had heard tales that the tyrants were not united, that factions fought in secret, that the endless fleet might not truly be here to destroy humanity, but to keep something locked away. Their hushed words carried both fear and fascination. Was humanity caught in a war larger than anyone realized, or were these just stories born from exhaustion and fear? None of them knew for certain, but the questions gnawed at them more fiercely than hunger. Back on the bridge, sensors detected subtle anomalies at the edge of the enemy fleet. Strange energy signatures flickered faintly, as though something vast was hidden behind the curtain of warships. The data was incomplete, scrambled by interference, but one thing was clear. Whatever lay beyond was not part of the tyrant's usual arsenal. It pulsed with a rhythm, almost alive, almost watching. The commander weighed every angle. If this was truly a trap, why had one alien warship broken ranks to deliver a warning? If it was a message of deceit, why cloak it in fear? And if something else was stirring behind the fleet, then humanity was facing not just the tyrants, but a shadow deeper than any they had ever known. Yet hesitation was dangerous. The Armada could crush them at any second, and already the Black Ship was running thin on resources. The crew knew this war was not just fought with weapons, but with choices. Every decision carried ripples across the galaxy. If they pressed forward recklessly, they could hand their enemies a victory. If they retreated, they risked shattering the fragile hope that held humanity together. And if they hesitated too long, whatever stirred behind that fleet might rise unchecked. The alien warship that had flashed the warning suddenly flickered with weapons fire, not aimed at the Black Ship but at itself. Its hull ruptured, explosions bursting outward as if its crew had chosen destruction over capture. The blast lit the void, and for a moment the entire armada shifted, their formation tightening. If there had been any doubt that something was wrong, it was gone now. Even the tyrants were not fully in control. The black ship's crew watched in silence, the afterglow of the explosion reflecting in their eyes. Questions burned hotter than ever. What had the alien vessel feared? Why destroy itself rather than reveal more? And what had it meant by those final words? It awakens. Subplots rippled through the tension. Among the crew, divisions grew quietly. Some believed they should retreat, regroup, and uncover the truth before pressing further. Others believed they must strike now, before the tyrants unleashed whatever power waited behind their fleet. A few, silent and grim, whispered that maybe humanity had stumbled into a war it was never meant to fight, and that survival might mean walking away entirely. But no choice was simple. Behind them, humanity's scattered colonies waited, fragile and exposed. If the black ship retreated, it would leave them vulnerable. If they advanced, they might be walking into annihilation. And if they hesitated, the tyrants could crush them and erase every whisper of rebellion before it had a chance to ignite. The commander stood still at the center of it all, carrying the weight of those choices. The faces around them reflected trust, fear, and determination all at once. This was humanity's burden, never the luxury of certainty. Always the struggle of choosing between fire and shadow. As the alien armada shifted again, the stars seemed to darken. The strange energy pulsed stronger now, a heartbeat echoing across the void, steady and cold. Whatever it was waiting, patient and unseen. And humanity, caught between the tyrants and the unknown, was left staring into a horizon darker than ever before. The black ship did not falter. Its engines burned quietly, its weapons remained primed, and its crew prepared themselves for what was to come. But inside every soul, a question whispered louder with every passing moment. Was the final war truly against the tyrants? Or had humanity only been pushed towards something far worse, something ancient, that the galaxy itself had long feared to face? The void pressed down on the black ship like a weight, each passing second tightening around the crew's hearts. The enemy fleet stretched endlessly before them, shields glowing, weapons primed, yet still they held formation as though waiting for something unseen to give the signal. That strange rhythm, that pulsing energy hidden behind the armada grew stronger with each scan. The displays could no longer deny it. Whatever lay beyond was alive, or something close enough to it. The commander studied the readouts, jaw tight, while the crew worked in tense silence. No one said the words aloud, but everyone felt the same unease. The tyrants had gathered their fleet not only to destroy the black ship, but also to guard something, or perhaps keep it locked away. If that was true, humanity was no longer fighting just for survival. They were standing at the edge of a secret war, one that had shaped the galaxy long before their species had risen from the dirt of Earth. The memory of the alien warship's self-destruction lingered. Its message, "It awakens," played again and again in their thoughts. What had those beings feared more than death? What could terrify even servants of the tyrants into turning their weapons on themselves? The commander knew that answer was waiting behind the enemy lines. But reaching it would mean tearing through a force so vast that no human ship should ever have dared to face it. In the quiet of the med bay, soldiers prepared for what might be their last battle. They checked weapons, strapped on armor, and exchanged looks heavy with unspoken truths. No one needed to say they might not return. That knowledge had become as familiar as the hum of the engines. Yet still they stood ready. For them, this war was not just about survival, but about leaving something behind, a future where children could grow without fear, a galaxy where humanity could shape its own destiny. In the engine decks, mechanics worked like ghosts in the dim light, patching coolant lines with whatever scraps they could find, whispering about how long the shields could hold under a full barrage. The numbers weren't good, but none of them let it show. They knew the crew needed hope, even if that hope came wrapped in lies. One engineer ran their hand across the battered hull and whispered a promise, as if the ship itself could hear. Just one more fight. Carry us one more time. On the bridge, The younger crew members dared to ask what others only thought. Was it possible that the tyrants weren't in control at all? That their fleet was not here as a wall of power, but as a prison? The commander didn't answer, not because they didn't know, but because the truth would only deepen the fear. Still, the question hung in the air, a quiet storm ready to break. The enemy made their move. A formation of cruisers split from the main armada, advancing in a slow, deliberate arc. Their weapons glowed, but they did not fire. They were herding the black ship, pushing it toward the center of the fleet, toward the pulsing energy. The trap was closing, and the crew knew it. The commander's eyes flickered across the tactical map. To retreat meant exposing Earth's scattered colonies. To advance meant plunging into the heart of whatever lay beyond. Neither choice offered safety. The tension thickened, becoming almost unbearable. Every sound on the bridge seemed amplified. The click of keys, the hum of systems, the steady, unbroken breathing of people who refused to let fear master them. The stars beyond seemed colder than ever, as if the universe itself was watching, waiting to see what humanity would do. The black ship held its course, slipping closer to the enemy formation. The crew tightened grips on their stations, ready for the storm. At any second, the void could ignite with fire, and they would be consumed. Yet they pressed forward. To stand still was to surrender, and humanity had never been born to kneel. Then the pulse behind the fleet surged. For the first time, it was visible to the naked eye, a shimmer rippling across the stars, like heat distortion bending reality. The crew froze as the anomaly grew, swirling like a wound torn open in the fabric of space. Energy crackled across the void, scattering readings, overwhelming sensors. The alien fleet shifted subtly, their precision suddenly uneven, their formation less like an army and more like a wall bracing against a storm. The commander whispered a single truth, too quiet for most to hear. "They're afraid." And it was true. The tyrants' warships, vessels that had conquered worlds without pause, now looked less like predators and more like sentinels. The crew exchanged sharp looks, hearts pounding. If the tyrants feared what lay beyond that rift, then what was awakening? The black ship drifted into range of the first cruiser wall. Enemy weapons locked on, the targeting signals sharp and unmistakable. The crew braced, but still no shots were fired. The silence before the storm pressed harder, suffocating, unbearable. It was as if the tyrants wanted humanity to see, to witness whatever horror they kept chained beyond the dark horizon. Whispers rippled through the crew. Some spoke of ancient legends, stories of wars fought before recorded history, when powers older than any empire had shaped the galaxy. Others believed it was a weapon, one too dangerous even for the tyrants to use, now stirring once more. And some believed it was not a weapon at all, but a presence, something vast and hungry, something that had slept until humanity's defiance rattled the cage. Still, the black ship pressed forward. Every eye turned to the growing rift, its swirling light casting eerie shadows across the bridge. The hum of the ship's engines seemed smaller now, drowned by the rhythm of that pulse. The crew could feel it in their bones, a vibration that seemed to echo inside their very blood. The commander gave the order. Weapons armed, shields primed, engines pushed to maximum. If the tyrants thought humanity would cower before this unseen terror, they were wrong. Whatever waited in the dark, humanity would face it head-on. Better to die fighting than to vanish without defiance. The enemy reacted. At last, their weapons fired, beams of burning energy cutting across the void. The black ship rolled hard, shields flaring, the deck shuddering beneath the crew's feet. The battle had begun. Explosions flared in the darkness, brilliant sparks against the endless night. The black ship struck back, its guns roaring, its missiles streaking like fire. The void filled with chaos, and for the first time the trap revealed its teeth. But even as ships exploded and shields burned, the pulse behind the armada surged again, brighter, stronger, tearing the rift wider. A shape began to emerge within the light, massive, indistinct, its outline shifting as though reality itself struggled to contain it. The crew stared, unable to look away, even as alarms screamed and the battle raged around them. The commander gripped the console, eyes locked on the growing form. The enemy's firepower no longer seemed the greatest threat. The true danger was awakening before their very eyes. The tyrants had gathered their armada not to crush humanity, but to hold the line against something far worse. And now that line was breaking. The black ship fought desperately, weaving through the storm, firing with every weapon it had, but the crew's hearts were caught between fear and awe. They were no longer standing on the edge of a simple war. They were staring into the abyss of something ancient, something beyond tyrant or human, something that might consume them all. The void trembled. The rift split wider, and the crew felt the pulse become a roar. The moment was coming when everything would break, when survival would hinge not just on strength, but on choices that could decide the fate of the galaxy. Humanity had come this far, but now the question burned hotter than ever. Were they ready to face what was awakening in the dark horizon? The rift tore wider, spilling light across the battlefield, and for a moment it seemed as if the stars themselves had been drowned out. The black ship rocked under the turbulence, alarms screaming, the deck shuddering as though the void itself was collapsing around them. Out of the churning distortion, the outline grew clearer. It was massive, far larger than any warship, its form shifting in ways that defied logic, a living shadow wrapped in blinding fire. The crew stared in silence, fear pressing against their chests, each of them understanding at once that this was no ordinary weapon. This was something ancient, something the tyrants had tried to cage. But then came the second shock. From the chaos of the fleet, not all the alien ships fired at humanity. Some broke away, turning their weapons not against the black ship but against their own formation. Massive blasts cut into the armada, tearing holes in the perfect wall of precision. For the first time, the black ship's crew saw rebellion in the tyrant's own ranks. It was not just humanity who refused to kneel. Others had been waiting, hiding their defiance until this moment of unraveling. The commander's eyes narrowed as the displays lit with shifting allegiances. Whole squadrons split apart, some firing on the rift, some on their supposed allies, some fleeing in terror. The armada that once looked untouchable now fractured into chaos. Yet the black ship had no reason to celebrate. The thing inside the rift was still rising, and the disunity of the tyrants only made the battlefield more unpredictable. The second twist settled heavily across the bridge. Humanity was not alone in defiance. Species that had bowed for ages, ground under tyranny, now revealed themselves in the shadows of betrayal. But were they truly allies or opportunists trying to survive a disaster of their master's making? The crew could not know. Trust was dangerous in the void, and betrayal could come as quickly as salvation. Still, the sight of alien warships breaking ranks carried a dangerous hope. Perhaps humanity's fight had sparked something larger than anyone expected. Even with this new fracture, the ancient presence continued to rise. Its form shifted through the rift, tentacles of energy sweeping outward like the arms of a storm. The crew felt the vibrations deep inside themselves, as if the thing was not just seen but also heard, not just heard but felt inside their bones. Weapons from both sides fired at it, blasts of light and plasma striking its shifting skin, yet nothing slowed it. The entity moved like a mountain uprooted, too vast, too enduring for ordinary firepower to harm. The commander issued sharp orders, pulling the black ship into evasive maneuvers, weaving through the battlefield as chaos erupted. Alien cruisers fired at one another. Squadrons of defectors clashed against loyalists, and through it all the ancient being advanced. The ship's crew had no illusions. This was not a war they could win with brute force. They were caught in the middle of something older, darker, and far more dangerous than their struggle against the tyrants. Still, humanity had never been strangers to impossible odds. On the lower decks, soldiers braced for boarding actions, knowing that in chaos, smaller enemy ships might try to latch on to the black ship. In the engineering bay, mechanics forced the engines harder than ever, pushing them beyond limits already broken by years of battle. The medbay prepared for waves of wounded, though every medic knew they might not live long enough to treat them. Every soul aboard moved with grim purpose. The question was no longer whether they would survive the next battle. It was whether they could shape what came after. The second twist spread through the crew like wildfire. If alien defectors had turned against the tyrants, then humanity was not truly alone. But if this ancient being broke free, then no alliance would matter. The tyrant's cruelty might look like order compared to what was coming through that rift. Some whispered that the galaxy had traded one master for another, something far worse than tyranny. The black ship threaded between enemy fire, its guns roaring, its missiles carving through the battlefield. They struck both tyrant loyalists and the rift-born being, fighting on all fronts at once. Each explosion rattled the hull, every hit felt deep in the marrow of the crew. Yet they pressed on, their determination sharper than fear. Humanity had always survived by adapting. And now they faced the ultimate test: adapt to chaos on a galactic scale or be consumed by it. On the bridge, the commander's gaze fell on a flicker of readings no one else had noticed. Buried inside the energy surge of the rift was something stranger. Patterns, repeating signals hidden inside the chaos. It wasn't random. It was communication. The being was not mindless, not just a storm. It was speaking, though in a language no one could yet understand. The commander's thoughts chilled. If it could communicate, then perhaps it had a purpose. If it had a purpose, then perhaps it was not an accident it had been imprisoned. The crew didn't know this revelation yet, but they felt it in their bones. This was not just a battle. It was a choice. Humanity had stepped into the heart of something that could reshape the galaxy forever. The tyrants were no longer the only enemy. Now there was a force rising that none of them truly understood. Explosions rocked the void again as a wave of defecting alien ships streaked toward the black ship, hailing with signals of alliance. The commander hesitated. If they opened communication, they risked betrayal. If they ignored it, they risked losing a chance at survival. Around them, the battlefield spun in chaos. Loyalists firing at rebels, rebels firing at the rift-born entity pressing forward, unstoppable. Humanity's lonely war had just become something far greater, something tangled in secrets older than the stars. The black ship weaved through it all. The crew gripping consoles, sweat dripping down their brows, hearts pounding like war drums. Each second stretched into eternity as the rift tore wider, the entity rising taller, clearer, more solid with every passing breath. It was almost fully free now. The tyrants were desperate, pouring fire into it, sacrificing entire fleets to hold it back, but their power cracked and splintered under its advance. For the first time in living memory, the tyrants looked like prey. That sight alone was enough to shake the crew to their core. If even the galaxy's tyrants feared this thing, what chance did humanity have? And yet deep inside, a truth glimmered. Humanity had faced extinction before and risen. Perhaps it was not about chance, but about defiance itself. The second twist had become undeniable. Humanity was not the only rebellion. Other species were rising, some out of fear, some out of desperation, some inspired by the fire Earth had carried into the stars. Yet in the center of it all, the true threat grew larger, its voice whispering in pulses of energy, its form breaking through the chains of space itself. The black ship hurtled toward its destiny, the crew's eyes wide with both terror and determination. They knew the climax was coming, that soon choices would have to be made. Choices that would decide not only the survival of humanity, but the fate of every living world in the galaxy. And as the rift split fully open and the battlefield drowned in light, one thought burned in every mind aboard the black ship. This was no longer just a war of survival. This was the test of whether humanity was ready to stand not just against tyrants, but against the unknown itself. The rift burst open with a roar of light, swallowing the stars and hurling shockwaves across the battlefield. The black ship rocked violently, its crew clinging to consoles as alarms blared and sparks rained from overloaded systems. Through the glare, the being emerged in full, a colossus of shadow and fire, its body vast enough to eclipse entire fleets. It moved with terrifying grace, each shift of its form bending space as though the universe itself strained under its presence. The tyrant armada, once unified in perfect formation, now fought with desperation. Loyalist ships hurled every weapon they had into the creature, beams of plasma and missiles of unimaginable power. Yet the blasts dissolved against its shifting skin like drops of rain on a storm. Defector vessels joined in, their firepower adding to the onslaught. But the result was the same. Nothing slowed the ancient entity. It advanced, silent but undeniable, and the battlefield fractured into chaos. The black ship cut through the storm, its weapons blazing, striking both loyalist tyrants and the creature itself. Explosions painted the void with bursts of color, but the enemy was too vast, too enduring. Every strike from humanity felt like throwing stones at a mountain. Still, the crew fought, their hands steady even as their hearts pounded. They had been here before, outnumbered, outgunned, told survival was impossible. Yet humanity had always fought hardest when the world claimed they could not. The commander's gaze remained locked on the creature. Amid the chaos, a realization had taken root. The energy pulses it gave off weren't just random noise. They were signals, deliberate and rhythmic, like a language struggling to be heard. The commander ordered the communications team to isolate the patterns, to try to decode even fragments of meaning. While weapons roared outside, inside the bridge, the crew strained to listen to a voice older than any empire. The message came slowly, words broken and distorted, but clear enough to chill them to the bone. It spoke not of hunger nor rage, but of release. The entity had been bound, imprisoned by the tyrants, locked away for millennia. Not because it was their servant, but because it was their enemy. The fleet they had gathered was not just a wall of power, it was a prison, built to hold something they could never truly destroy. And now, humanity's war had broken the lock. The commander's thoughts twisted with dread. Humanity had come to fight tyrants, to free the galaxy from chains. But in doing so, they had unleashed a foe that might consume everything, tyrant and human alike. The war was no longer about rebellion. It was about survival against a force that even the galaxy's rulers had feared. Yet in the darkest moment, a choice revealed itself. If the entity had been bound, then it could be bound again. But only if someone acted not with weapons alone, but with will. The black ship carried technology stolen from the tyrants, pieces of the very systems once used to contain this being. If they could channel the ship's remaining power, if they could fuse human defiance with stolen alien science, they might forge a chain strong enough to hold the creature once more. The order went out. Engineering rerouted everything into the core, stripping shields, starving weapons, feeding all energy into one desperate gamble. Sparks flew, systems burned, the ship itself groaned as if protesting, but the crew pushed harder. They knew what was at stake. The battlefield screamed with fire, but the black ship turned inward, becoming not just a vessel of war, but a prison forged in defiance. The entity turned its gaze, vast and unblinking, toward the black ship. The crew felt its presence inside their minds, an endless weight pressing down, testing them, probing them. It could crush them in an instant, yet it hesitated. It recognized something, humanity's refusal to yield. For the first time, the tyrants were no longer the center of the galaxy's story. Humanity stood face to face with the unknown, and the unknown took notice. The black ship unleashed its core, beams of light and chains of energy weaving into a lattice across the void. The ancient being writhed, not in pain but in resistance, its body shifting violently against the tightening bonds. The battlefield froze as both tyrant and defector ships pulled back, watching in silence as humanity dared to do what no one else had ever tried. The void itself shook, the black ship burning from within, systems collapsing one by one. The crew fought to hold it, hands bleeding, eyes burning, every nerve screaming. The commander's voice carried through the chaos, steady and unbroken. "Hold! We are the line! We are the chain!" The words became a mantra, repeated through clenched teeth, through pain and exhaustion, binding the crew together as tightly as the chains they were forging. Humanity had always been fragile, but together they were unbreakable. At last, the lattice closed. The entity screamed without sound, its vast body collapsing inward, pulled back into the rift. Light consumed the battlefield, brighter than any star, blinding, overwhelming, and then silence. The rift sealed shut, the void returning to darkness, the stars burning once more. The creature was gone. The galaxy was spared, but the black ship was dying. Its hull cracked, its systems shattered, its core drained to ash. Fires burned along its decks, smoke filling the air. The crew looked around, exhausted but alive, their bodies broken but their spirits unbowed. They had done the impossible. They had not only survived, they had chained the unchained. The tyrant fleet, fractured and bloodied, lingered in silence. For the first time in living memory, they had not won. They had not crushed defiance. They had stood witness as humanity bound what they themselves could not. The balance of power shifted in that moment, a shift no weapon could undo. The galaxy would remember, and then came the twist. From the fractured remains of the defecting alien fleet, a signal pulsed through the void. It was not a cry of victory, nor of surrender. It was a call, a beacon. The Black ship's comms lit up with hundreds of signals from across the galaxy. Colonies long hidden, rebel cells thought extinct. Entire worlds thought silent, answering, rising, ignited by what they had just seen. Humanity had not just fought for survival. They had sparked a rebellion that spread like fire across the stars. But among those signals came one more, faint and haunting. It was not alien, not tyrant, not ancient. It was human. A voice from beyond the edge of known space, claiming there were others, human colonies that had fled before Earth ever stood tall, exiled long ago, waiting, watching, preparing. The crew froze, their exhaustion drowned in disbelief. Humanity was not alone in the galaxy, not just in rebellion, but in blood. The Black ship drifted in silence, battered but unbroken, as the truth settled in. They had fought the tyrants. They had chained the ancient. But the war was not over. It had only just begun, and now the battlefield was far greater than anyone had ever imagined. Humanity had stepped into the stars, and the stars were answering back. The Black ship drifted in silence after the battle, its hull scorched and its engines whispering with the last of their strength. Inside, the crew moved like shadows through dim corridors lit only by emergency lights. Every breath carried the weight of what they had survived. They had chained the unchained, bound an ancient force that had terrified even the tyrants, and in doing so had reshaped the story of the galaxy. Yet as the fires cooled and systems flickered out, the question lingered in every heart. What came next? The medbay overflowed with wounded. But even there, a quiet pride carried through the pain. Soldiers who had fought with shattered limbs now rested with faint smiles, knowing their struggle had not been in vain. Engineers who had pushed the engines past breaking sat slumped against walls, hands still stained with grease, whispering that the ship had held because they had willed it to. Every deck carried its scars, but those scars were proof that humanity had endured when no one believed they could. On the bridge, the commander stood silent, watching the fractured fleets beyond the viewports. The tyrant armada no longer moved with precision. Their formations were broken, their discipline shattered. Ships that once flew like blades of a single machine now drifted apart, some withdrawing in shame, others burning as wrecks. Defector vessels lingered cautiously, their lights dim, sending faint signals of acknowledgement. No words were exchanged, but the meaning was clear enough. Humanity had not just survived, they had changed the balance. The tyrants were no longer eternal. Their grip had been broken, and now fear turned inward, eating them from within. The signals that followed carried deeper weight. Rebel voices from hidden colonies, forgotten outposts, and enslaved worlds answered the beacon that had been lit in the chaos. For centuries they had whispered in the dark, waiting for proof that defiance could succeed. Now they had seen it. The message spread faster than any fleet could chase. Humanity's defiance had become a spark that lit 1,000 fires across the stars. The tyrants could not put them all out. The crew gathered in the mess hall, their exhaustion heavy but their spirits bound together. They spoke of the defectors who had turned their guns against the tyrants, of the ancient being chained once more, and of the signals calling from distant space. For the first time, their war felt larger than themselves. Humanity had not been fighting alone. They were part of something vast, a tide of rebellion rising from every corner of the galaxy. And in that truth, they found a strength deeper than any weapon. The commander addressed them not with speeches, but with simple words. They spoke of sacrifice, of the lives lost along the way, and of the burden that still lay ahead. But they also spoke of hope. The hope that humanity had carried from its first step into the stars, the belief that freedom was worth any price. The crew listened in silence, their eyes reflecting firelight and resolve. They knew the road ahead would not be easy, but they no longer carried it alone. Beyond the broken fleets, the stars stretched endless. Among them came a voice faint but unmistakable, the signal that had whispered from beyond known space. It spoke of human colonies lost to history, cast adrift long before Earth had built its first starship. They had survived in exile, growing in silence, watching the galaxy from the edges. And now, hearing the black ship's defiance, they were ready to return. Humanity was larger than anyone had imagined. The story of their kind was not one of isolation, but of endurance scattered across the stars. The revelation shook the crew as deeply as the battle had. They were not the first. They were not the only. Humanity was older in the galaxy than they had believed, their struggle just another chapter in a far longer tale. It meant that allies waited in the dark, kin bound not by tyrants' chains, but by blood. It meant that humanity's fight was not a lonely defiance, but the awakening of something that had been building for ages. The black ship had simply been the spark. Days passed as the ship limped through repairs, patching what little could be saved. Defector vessels offered supplies, though always at a careful distance, as if unsure whether trust could yet be earned. The crew accepted cautiously, knowing that in chaos, survival was often the first alliance. They did not need promises of loyalty now. They needed only time to heal, time to rise, time to prepare for what was coming next, because the war was not over. The tyrants still held countless worlds. Their empire was cracked but not destroyed. The ancient being had been chained again, but chains could always weaken, and no one could say how long they would hold. The galaxy was unstable, every system shifting, every alliance uncertain. Yet within that uncertainty lay the greatest hope of all. That change had come, and it could not be undone. As the black ship turned its battered hull toward home, the crew carried more than memories of battle. They carried proof that defiance mattered, that courage could bend even the oldest chains, that humanity's will could ignite rebellion across the stars. They had seen the tyrants bleed. They had seen the galaxy tremble. And they had seen that humanity was far greater than the galaxy had ever believed. When the ship finally reached the colonies, its arrival was met not with mourning, but with firelight celebrations that stretched across the night skies. Children pointed at the stars with wonder, whispering of the black ship that had stood against the galaxy itself. Elders spoke of unity, of strength, of the day humanity had stepped beyond fear and faced the unknown with unbroken will. The story spread, carried on every signal, repeated on every world. Humanity was no longer a whisper in the galaxy. They were a voice, loud and unshakable. The commander walked the ship one last time, touching the walls, listening to the hum of what remained. Every scar in the hull told a story. Every flicker of light carried the memory of lives spent in defiance. The black ship was not just a vessel. It was humanity itself. Battered, scarred, but unbroken, moving ever forward. In the quiet of the night, the commander looked to the horizon and knew the truth. The war ahead would be long. The tyrants would not surrender easily. The chains of the ancient would not hold forever. And the hidden human colonies would bring their own challenges when they emerged from the shadows. But humanity no longer walked in fear. They walked in defiance, in unity, in hope. The stars stretched endless, filled with danger, but also with promise. The black ship had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. And now, with the fire of rebellion spreading and the truth of their scattered kin revealed, humanity was ready for whatever came next. The final war had not ended that day. It had only begun. But the galaxy would remember the black ship, the crew who stood at the edge of annihilation and refused to kneel, and the moment when humanity's dark horizon became the dawn of something greater.